Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and no, that's not it. Good grief, blockhead! I couldn't do it right.
So. No, you sound like you're preparing for an episode about a horror movie or something.
That's what I did. It was totally wrong. I know. I was trying to get that because this is the first one where they ever went so I was trying to do it, but not. I mean, I should have just stuck with the.
That's kind of what I figured you would be doing.
Well, that's why I tried to change it up. So
that's okay. Well, you have a history of doing some very strong impressions of very obscure personages. So we'll forgive you for unsuccessfully attempting to impersonate Charlie Brown in this episode of our
Dave,
season.
If you want to take that soundbite and put it back in our Frankenstein episode.
Retroactively add that. In this episode of our season on the films of 1969, we are talking about our animation pick, and that is A Boy Named Charlie Brown, the first theatrical feature film based on the beloved Peanuts characters created by Charles M. Schulz for his long-running newspaper comic strip. They had previously starred in 6 TV specials already, including some of the big classic ones that we still watch over and over again, had become very popular on television and, of course, in the newspaper strip. So it made sense to then bring them to the big screen, basically with the same creative team, mainly Bill Melendez, the director, and the same producer as well, and Charles M. Schulz as the writer of the screenplay, and a number of the voice actors who had worked on the TV specials. Although one of the unique things about the Peanuts franchise is that they're always using actual kids to voice these characters. So they don't last that long. They get too old and they keep having to be replaced. So this was the final appearance for several of these actors, including Peter Robbins, who does the voice of Charlie Brown. And this movie was a big hit. I mean, it's not surprising. The Peanuts were very popular. It grossed $12 million on its budget of $1.1 million. And it was a rare non-Disney at the time, a rare non-Disney animated movie to make it into theaters and to be a hit with audiences.
Yeah, I found a quote from a reviewer who said they finally broke the Disney dynasty on animated films with this one. And like you were saying, man, it's funny because I think Peanuts is it's always there. Like we always know it's there, but we never necessarily think of how successful it is. They've had 51 animated specials for TV, 5 feature films, including the Peanuts movie that came out, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. That made over 240 million worldwide. So that's pretty good right there. And they're a part of our life here in America, Josh.
They are. They're an enduring institution. I feel like, to me, I compare them to the Muppets. I think we were talking about that maybe before we were going to watch this movie. And as we established in our Muppet double feature episode, I'm kind of lukewarm on the Muppets. And I was thinking I feel the same about the Peanuts characters. But as I was watching this film, I thought, no, you know what? I like the Peanuts characters more than the Muppets. But I think similarly, they've just been everywhere for so long that they're just part of the fabric of American culture.
Yeah, I, of course, am a huge Muppets fan, but I do think that last Peanuts movie was high quality, and the Muppets have been very hit and miss in this century.
Yeah, maybe more consistency with the Peanuts. And I mean, part of that, especially for the first few decades or whatever, was that Charles Schulz not only was the creator of the comic strip, but was behind the TV specials as well as a writer and producer. So this movie also was nominated for an Oscar, for an award that no longer exists, for Best Original Song Score, which is given kind of to, I think, more to musicals, like for a collection of original songs in a film. And I'm not sure at what point that award was no longer given. I think when there were not as many original film musicals being made.
Do you know what it lost to?
I don't. Did you look that up? I should.
Yes. Some hacky band called the Beatles, Let It Be.
Well, that's
Imagine
fair.
that.
If you're going to lose, you might as well lose to the Beatles, right? That's the best. So.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, maybe we'll get into, but the original songs in this movie are probably the weakest aspect of it. So
I really like the I before E, the spelling bee song. I thought that was so clever and hard to put together, and it was very catchy. I thought that was a good one.
That was a fun one, and I believe that might have been previously used in a Muppets. I'm still on the Muppets in a Peanuts TV special, but the original songs by Rod McEwen, I thought were just absolutely pretty dreadful.
But Josh, we have referenced Rod McEwen on this season. Do you know when?
We have, because he won the Oscar. He lost this Oscar, but he won, or no, they lost the other Oscar too, but was also nominated, or did that one win? The song from the prime of Miss Jean Brody.
Jean, which I thought that song wasn't very good.
But... No, Rod McEwen. Well, maybe I feel like I read a lot about him, so we can get to that later.
No, I'm glad, when we do that, honestly, like reading about all these like 5 or 6 main players who are involved, not just Schulz, but Bill Melendez, Lee Mendelsohn, and then the 3 kind of composers. They're pretty fascinating people. Like I really liked learning about them.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that these sort of creative forces and Rod McEwen aside, I mean, Bill Melendez and Lee Mendelsohn, their careers were basically made by the Peanuts and completely focused on the Peanuts. So.
I mean, it kind of worked out the way you would hope it would work out, knowing the reputation of Charles Schulz, which was like Lee Mendelsohn said, like, hey, let's do a documentary in like 1963 about Peanuts. And they did, and it never aired, but then they just started working together forever. Right. And Bill Melendez was the same thing. They were working on like campaign commercials. And then when Mendelsohn asked them if they wanted to make this movie, Schulz was like, yeah, let's get Bill in there. I'm working with him. He'll be good for it. So it's very kind of cool, like old school, like, hey, these are the people I like working with. This is how I'm going to do it the best. And I got to say, it worked out for them, Josh.
It did. I mean, and they continued again for decades. The first special aired in 1965. So only 4 years before this, and they'd already made 6 of those specials by the time this movie came out. So very successful and continued to be so. And critics were generally pretty positive on this film as well. Vincent Canby in the New York Times said, I do have some reservations about the film, but it's difficult, perhaps impossible, to be anything except benign towards a G-rated animated movie that manages to include references to St. Stephen, Thomas Eakins, Harper's Ferry, baseball, contemporary morality, conservation, and kite flying. It's quite apparent that Schulz himself wrote the screenplay, which was directed by Bill Melendez and produced by Lee Mendelsohn. The 3 have been collaborating successfully for some time now on the Charlie Brown television specials, whose 30-minute formats may be about as long as any 4-panel comic strip can be generally stretched. For the most part, Melendez is satisfied to recreate with fidelity Schultz's own style, which is an apotheosis of the sort of cartooning that I associate with the correspondence courses once advertised in the back of Boy's Life. A house is a house, a tree is a tree, which is as it should be in the world of Charlie Brown.
Right. So I like that he referenced all the kind of cool references that they use here. That's part of the charm, right? Like it's a kids thing, but they don't treat kids any differently than they would treat adults. The way Charlie Brown talks, he just sounds like a sad, depressed adult. Like Charlie Brown, could you have switched a Charlie Brown script and a mid-70s Woody Allen script and given them to each other? And I think it would have had the same type of angst. But no, I really like that about this movie. Just kind of, it's a lot of clever lines, right? You enjoy the animation and the characters, and then he kind of sneaks up with you like all these kind of clever retorts and one-liners, and that's part of the fun here.
Yeah, I mean, I think in that opening scene where Charlie Brown and Lucy and Linus are looking at the clouds and talking about what they see, and a bunch of those references that Vincent Canby mentions are right there in that scene where Linus says, oh, I see, this like classical sculpture here, or this thing from the Bible or whatever. And like right away, I was like, oh yeah, I really enjoy this stuff. It's really amusing the way they do this. And like you said, the way it sounds like a Woody Allen movie or something, but is also perfectly kid-friendly. I mean, even if kids were watching that and they didn't know what Linus was talking about, the idea that he's saying something sort of highbrow and complex, and then Charlie Brown is like, I see a doggy. is
No, it's
clear.
a famous line. He says, I was going to say, I see a ducky, but I'm going to
Right.
think about it more or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
very, very funny. Very funny. But Josh,
It
yours
is.
was good too.
No, I mean, I was just paraphrasing there, but
Yeah, but you did a good job of the paraphrase.
okay,
Josh.
thank you. Yeah. So, um, Time Magazine, in their unbylined review, said, "An hour and a half is a long time for any child or beagle to be amusing, and the whimsy that attempts to fill the time frequently falters. Charlie's grim pursuit of best speller status could use some comic strip relief, and an interlude of Schroeder playing Beethoven's Pathétique falls into the old Fantasia trap, overly baited with pictorial gewgaws and kitsch. But when a boy named Charlie Brown sticks to a boy named Charlie Brown, it becomes a good deed in a naughty world, bright, nonviolent, and equipped with an animated moral, the way Snoopy is equipped with a tail."
So I like that Schroeder sequence myself. I thought it was, kind of mesmerizing and everything. So that was cool. I know when they aired it on TV, that was one of the sequences they cut. And I thought it was cool, not just because it was like this long classical musical interlude, but the animation and like showing like the great wonders and statues and artworks of the world. It worked for me. It's totally idiosyncratic in regards to the rest of the movie, but I thought it was good. I like that part.
Yeah, I like that. And again, I feel like that's one of the strengths of this movie is that it'll have those like highbrow references, and it'll also say, you know what? For the next 3 minutes, we're just going to have a psychedelic music video set to Beethoven because we want to. And I like that about it. And it's also weird to me that they're using Fantasia as like a negative point of reference here. I mean, the Fantasia was like almost 30 years old at this point. I would think it probably was considered a classic already, but maybe some people were not fans of it.
Yeah. Well, that's always the case, Josh, but some people want that Mickey Mouse monopoly broken and others just want that Mickey Mouse murdered.
Okay. So finally, Molly Haskell in The Village Voice said, "I have never seen the Charlie Brown television show, but I imagine the new 85-minute movie is closer to the TV specials than to the Peanuts strip. Nevertheless, the movie does have its compensations, like the memorabilia of an admired author, which are a pleasurable postscript to his art. Charlie Brown's succession of defeats, an effective connecting thread of the film, is broken by the pudgy anti-hero's brief and uncomfortable sojourn on the winner's side of life. Special visual effects, a psychedelic accompaniment to the Star-Spangled Banner, and some art illustrations of Schroeder's piano solo are pleasant enough and not inappropriate fillers, which is more than can be said for Rod McEwen's cheap and incongruously sentimental songs."
There we go again, just drilling McEwen for no reason.
I think there were multiple references to how terrible those songs were, and that was the one that fit with a clip that I wanted to get. But I wanted to get that in there because early, like the title song, right, comes very close to the beginning of the film as Charlie Brown is putting together his kite that he's going to try to fly. And as soon as that started, I was like, oh no, this is so terrible.
Well, that song's not good. The boy named Charlie, real slow, like a boy. It goes like this. Josh, it goes, a boy named Charlie Brown. That's like pretty much exactly.
That's actually, probably accurately bad. So,
but there were some other good songs,
Yeah, I mean, I think the McEwen songs are what's bad, and some of the stuff is taken from previous specials, and of course the instrumental music from Vince Guaraldi, who is widely known for his Peanuts music. All that stuff is great, and I think that even makes it clearer how bad those Rod McEwen songs are, because then you get the Vince Guaraldi music and it's like, oh, this is wonderful. Like, why do we have to go back to these crappy songs?
And a lot of that Guaraldi music had been used before in the TV specials, but they just kind of amped it up, made it more cinematic with horns or, just kind of a fuller sound. So, they're always referencing stuff they've done. The main plot here where Charlie Brown goes in the spelling bee, that's from a comic strip from like 66, I think. They changed it around to make it work better for the movie, but I do like that they always play on their history, including that Peanuts movie that I was referencing from like 10 years ago. They're playing on the history of the entire Peanuts comic strip. I like that.
Right. I mean, and that obviously is much, much later. But here, even in 1969, there is that history. There's things that people are going to be familiar with that if they're going to the movie theater to see a Charlie Brown movie, they're like, oh, I want to see this happen. I want to see Lucy with the football. I want to see, Schroeder playing the piano. I want to see Linus with his blanket. All of these sort of greatest hits of the comic strip and the TV specials.
I think you're right. I think people do want those hits, Josh.
They do. So were you a Peanuts fan as a kid, and had you seen this movie?
I have seen this movie, and I had seen it maybe a few years ago with Scarlett, my daughter. I was and am a Peanuts fan. I will continue to watch these. And I think we all have our favorites, and definitely holiday traditions, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I like I said, I feel like wouldn't have called myself a fan per se, but I generally enjoy whatever I see of them. I did enjoy that movie from 2015, and I certainly watched, the perennial holiday specials that were on TV every year when I was a kid. And I had not seen this movie. I don't think Peanuts was a thing where I wasn't like seeking out all of the different versions of it. I watched whatever was on TV when I was a kid. And I still have this memory of watching Charlie Brown, which was a Peanuts special from 1990 when I would have been like 10 or 11 years old, which is about a new classmate of the Charlie Brown and his friends who gets cancer. And it was traumatizing, I think, to me at the time. And as an anxious person, I still remember that the way that they discover that this little girl has cancer is that she keeps bruising easily. And I think I was always self-conscious then about if I got a bruise, like maybe I have cancer. So thank you, Charlie Brown, for that.
I mean, you fit in with Charlie Brown and Linus. That type of anxiousness works out perfectly.
Yeah, it does. So, Dave, were you a Peanuts fan, and had you seen this?
I am almost certain I had seen this. I used to love all the Peanuts stuff when I was a kid, but I hadn't seen any of it since, maybe I was 10 or earlier.
So you haven't kept up. You didn't see that movie from 2015?
I had not, no.
All right. Well, anything else you want to say about the background of this film, Jason?
Josh, here's this fact about Charles Schulz. I mean, this dude, what a monster. Peanuts was published daily in 2,600 papers in 75 countries. 2,600 in 21 languages. Over nearly 50 years, Schulz drew 17,897 published Peanuts strips, only taking one vacation that entire time, a 5-week break in 1997 to celebrate his 75th birthday.
Yeah, he was a workhorse there. And a lot of those creators who have those very, very popular long-running comic strips, eventually they kind of hand off at least part of the job to assistants or whatever. And I don't think Schulz ever did that. So that's an impressive dedication that he showed to these characters. And it comes through, I think, in the fact that he is so involved with this movie and all the other Peanuts TV and movie things while he was alive.
And he pulls so much from his real life if you research him, just kind of a lot of the characters have different traits of either himself or, people that he knew growing up, all that fun stuff.
So we'll come back in a moment and talk more of our general thoughts on A Boy Named Charlie Brown. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1969, we are talking about our animated movie pick, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. And as many of these reviews alluded to, this was a much longer version of a Charlie Brown story than had been previously created. There were these TV specials, 30 minutes, and that's 30 minutes with commercials, so they're probably closer to 25 minutes. And do you think this justified being a feature film, Jason?
Yeah, I had no problem with it. I mean, again, it made a lot of money, right? The next few didn't make nearly as much. But it's a fun, I mean, that's the whole thing. They knew they were making a feature film. They couldn't just say, hey, it's going to be a 28-minute feature film, right? So
right, that's not a feature film. That's a short film.
Thank you, Josh. But I thought it worked just fine. It's as they say, it's episodic, right? There are little things here and there, but it's fun. And, you wonder where like you don't see Peppermint Patty yet, or Franklin yet. And, these are all characters we know from growing up. And it sustained for me. I thought it was good. I mean, the interesting thing is like can this hold up to like the classics, like It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, or something like that, right? The Christmas one. But as a feature film, I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about that because, of course, those are the ones that are perennials that people watch over and over and over again. And I feel like even though this was very successful at the box office at the time, it's not one that people watch as much over and over again. And it's interesting, too, I guess, because of the way that rights work or whatever, because this was a theatrical film. Apple bought the rights to all the TV specials, but that doesn't include this or the 3 other feature films that came out that were sort of follow-ups to it. And so you can stream this in other places. And I don't know if that is helpful or maybe detrimental because people assume like, oh, if I want to watch Peanut specials, I go to Apple TV and there they all are, and this wouldn't be there. So I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it has that same sort of enduring popularity as some of those major specials have.
I think you're right. I mean, obviously, you got, the holiday tie-in is part of that, though, Josh. Like, hey, we're going to watch a Charlie Brown Christmas once a year, right? That's like a thing. So these movies, I do think would, if they were placed with the rest of the collection, they would probably be easier found. Like, that just makes sense, right? But I've seen, if not all, most of the features. There's A Boy Named Charlie Brown, Snoopy Come Home, Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back, and then the Peanuts movie. So I do think, putting them all together so you can have that lineage would be good, Josh.
Right. Yeah. But I think you make a good point about the holiday stuff and that, there's tons and tons of other specials too over decades that don't get rewatched nearly as much as the Christmas one, the Halloween one, the Thanksgiving one. I mean, those are the big ones, but even other holiday related ones, I think people tend to watch over and over again. But I mean, going back to the idea of whether this is a sustainable feature film, it is episodic, as you say. And as much as I enjoyed some of those sort of surreal interludes, I mean, in addition to Schroeder's Beethoven solo and the performance of the Star Spangled Banner, as Molly Haskell noted in her review, there's also the sequence of Snoopy going ice skating, where we have these like sort of rotoscoped images of hockey players and stuff. And I do love that it's always very like surreal and psychedelic. But on the other hand, you can watch some of those interludes and think like, okay, they just needed to fill time here. And so they threw this in. And that's okay because they're all enjoyable to watch, but it doesn't feel like a cohesive building story per se. I mean, even the central idea of Charlie Brown entering the spelling bee takes kind of a while to begin and is a sporadically depicted storyline.
Right. I mean, to defend all that, one, the skating sequence in the song is probably one of the more well-known pieces of the whole Peanuts gang. And, in that Peanuts movie that we keep talking about, the CGI one, there's a huge, reference to that. They're all ice skating and playing hockey and everything like that. So I like those. I can see what you're saying about, hey, this is, weird and trippy and does it really all fit? And maybe if they had done them like we had just talked about the comic and they did like that montage of like 18 movies back to back to back, it would have been like, come on, dude, this is exhausting. But they spaced them out well, right? And I kind of liked all those kind of weird animations in there. So none of that really bothered me.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that it bothered me. And like I said, I enjoyed the individual pieces, but it did make it feel a bit like it was just a sort of a collection of things that they threw in there rather than a cohesive 90-minute, 85-minute, whatever.
And that's okay,
film.
Comic to comic. But you want to know what did bother me, Josh?
Okay.
And if you don't like foul language, then close your ears right now. Man, those girls were real cunts to Charlie Brown.
Oh, well, okay. I thought you were going to say some sort of innocuous word. Did that really bother you? Or was it just sort of like, I mean, it's meant to be frustrating, right? Charlie Brown is sort of hapless and these people are taking advantage of him. I don't think we're necessarily
They wrote a whole song for him called Failure Face, and they all knew the words. Like, what pieces of shit are these people?
Yeah. No, I think that you're meant to believe that is unfortunate, and Lucy especially, who is the leader of it, is really inconsiderate and rude to Charlie Brown. And I think we're meant to sympathize with him, right? This poor guy. He's a downtrodden 6-year-old or whatever, who is also a downtrodden middle-aged man in a way. And it's representative of both of those things. So, I mean, did that bother you in terms of like it hampered your enjoyment of the film, or was it just like, oh, I feel sorry for this character?
I was more of the latter. I didn't hamper my enjoyment of the film. But so it's interesting you bring this up. So I worked on this joke, and it's never really hit the way that I've wanted it to. But the way I said it is, this is why Charlie Brown grew up and became a school shooter, right? So already a good premise to start with.
Mm-hmm.
But the premise of the joke is it's from It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, right? And the kids, they all go trick-or-treating together, right? Charlie Brown and Linus, and well, not Linus because he's in the pumpkin patch, but Lucy, Peppermint Patty, whatever, Franklin. And, after every house they go to, they check their candy, right? And, Lucy's like, I got a chocolate bar. And Franklin's like, I got Skittles, whatever it is, right? And then Charlie Brown looks and is like, I got a rock, right? So the people give them a rock. Then they go to the next house, they check their candy. Lucy's like, I got a lollipop. And Franklin's like, oh, I got Reese's peanut butter cups. And Charlie Brown's like, I got a rock. And this repeats over and over. And I'm like, do you know how fucked up that is? Like, it wasn't just random. Like 20 people were like, we're just going to give this kid a rock. Like, this had to be planned out by the entire town. Like, hey, that bald little boy, let's fuck with his head, and just give him a rock the whole time. So to bring it to this movie, I thought the way that Lucy treated him and the other girls, like, if he grew up and murdered, became a serial killer, I feel like this is where you would start to place like where things went wrong for him. So.
Fully justified if it did.
Yeah. I mean, and that sequence, right, that you're talking about in the Great Pumpkin special shows that it's not just like his peers who are bullying him, like adults are bullying him, apparently, you know?
Or they're just never there. Like, I mean, these kids basically raise themselves, I think, if you think about the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, they're all just going to grandma's because no adult is in town. They're like, my parents just went away for the weekend for Thanksgiving without you. What is happening? So,
right. I mean, I feel like that is sort of the central conceit of Peanuts is that the adults are never around. And that's why you get the wah, 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 the voice of the teachers or any adult, because it's like adult presences are not really relevant. And so that's for everyone in here, not just for Charlie Brown. But yeah, I mean, I think we absolutely get that idea of him being bullied by everyone and Lucy as well. So I sort of took it in a different way. I mean, and I think your interpretation is certainly valid, the idea that he could grow up and murder them all. I was maybe a little more hopeful and imagining that maybe he and Lucy had some sort of kinky dom sub thing going on that might work out for them when they get a bit older. That would be a healthier outlet for those feelings, I think.
That would be, but in latter specials, one of the things that I enjoy, we know Lucy has this huge crush on Schroeder, and he just just rejects her constantly. And it makes me happy in those later specials that like Lucy gets some comeuppance for her assholishness all the time. So.
Right. Yeah. We don't see much of that here. We see more of Sally, Charlie Brown's sister, having a crush on Linus, and she keeps trying to convince him to take her on a date to the movies. And he's not up for that at all. So we do get some of that here.
Sally's pretty funny with like, you come over to the house and you say, would you like to go to a movie? I know one that's playing in town and it's for mature audiences only or whatever she says. She's pretty funny about that. Again, because this is so prevalent, you always tie it in, and it's like Sally learns the hard way about sticking with Linus in It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and she basically misses all of Halloween to go to the pumpkin patch with her fella, and they never see the Great Pumpkin. So.
Right. But I think all of these sort of neurotic tendencies among all of these characters are like key to what makes the Peanuts so enjoyable and so relatable, especially for us as adults. I definitely watched this and felt a lot of identification with Charlie Brown's anxiety and angst and, overthinking things or whatever. And it's very amusingly portrayed as he gets more and more stressed out in the spelling bee. And of course, part of it is that succeeding in the spelling bee is terrible for him because it means he has to continue succeeding, which is really stressful. So I love that about that storyline.
Yeah, that was very like Larry David Seinfeldish, where like they did 4 and then they're like, we'll pick you up for a full season. Like, I got to write 22 more of these, right? But what I took away from your relation to that is if there are any dominatrixes out there, Josh is ready, willing, and able and needs needs to not be so naughty anymore. So.
I'm sure I'm not the only person who took that away from this dynamic in this film and other depictions of Lucy and Charlie Brown.
I loved Snoopy growing up. I was a huge Snoopy fan. And, obviously the Macy's Day Parade, we see Snoopy all the time. And I think you get a few good pieces of Snoopy here with like the skating sequence and then that IB4E song where he's playing the Jew's harp. That's a lot of fun, right? But, I don't think we got the Red Baron in this one, right? Where he was, chasing the World War II fighter ace or whatever. That's a very famous kind of, and Joe Cool, his other alter ego. So it's fun to kind of see that character build over time as well.
Yeah, I think we got some of the flying ace. It's World War I flying ace.
World War I. Yeah, no, I mean, he had that nightmare where he was being chased, but it wasn't.
Yeah, but we don't see the Red Baron.
Reference like the Red Baron. Yeah,
right. And there's no Joe Cool. There's definitely not as much Snoopy in this one as there is in later ones. And of course, Snoopy became, like you're referencing, the Macy's parade and balloons and, being a commercial spokesperson and stuff, became really the dominant sort of character that broke out here in pop culture.
Maybe the best shot in Maestro, the Bradley Cooper movie.
I was going to mention, I wrote Maestro down in my notes as well.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen that movie, there's a scene where the Maestro, Leonard Bernstein, is having a fight with his wife in their New York apartment. And it's while the Thanksgiving parade is going on. And out of the window, you just see the Snoopy float go by. And it's just a brilliant little touch, right?
It's so huge. Dominating in the frame. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we know the Maestro was at very least bisexual. So throwing all those phallic things that are so huge, like that nose in there,
Snoopy's nose,
would have made sense for it. So,
we don't have. I don't know when he began. You mentioned Peppermint Patty and Franklin aren't in here. Woodstock, Snoopy's like bird sidekick. Was he wasn't in here either.
I don't think so. And Peppermint Patty you see in the background, but she has no line. She does hold up a sign that says like "Welcome Home, Chuck" at one point. But I had read that I took this fact involving Peppermint Patty and all that. At the 34:27 mark, when a group of kids exits the school, the same animation is looped multiple times. Several characters can be seen running out of the school, then reappearing at the steps and running out of the school again. Lucy, Patty, and Violet can each be seen 4 times.
Well, sometimes you had to do that to save money.
Yeah.
So, you were talking about being a Snoopy fan as a kid. And I think this was so like when I was a real little kid, like to the point where I don't even really remember this, but I think I was also a big Snoopy fan. When I was like 3 years old or something, we got a pet bird at my house and this is something like, again, I don't really remember, but my parents tell me this. And you would think if you're a big Peanuts fan and you get a pet bird, you're going to name it Woodstock. But I love Snoopy so much that I insisted we name the bird Snoopy, apparently. So the bird was named Snoopy.
You're a wild man, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. So, Dave, you didn't like this movie, though, right?
I mean, look, I feel like maybe I'm being a little harsh on it, but, the girls really did bug me a lot. Like, I thought they were just so awful. I also thought that each of those little sequences, as like weird and trippy and cool as some of them are, they all just went on too long. And I feel like I know, obviously, you guys were talking this needed to be a feature, but each sequence is just stretched out for no apparent reason, especially the spelling bee. So, I mean, there was just a lot of things about it that just, to me, it just kind of grated on me.
No, I mean, Dave, you're making sense. Long, weird, trippy sequences that go on too long. Definitely the guy who loves Ken Russell now would definitely make a good argument against that. So,
and Harmony Korine.
And Harmony Korine. Yeah.
All these things that you definitely haven't proven to love elsewhere, though, I understand. I don't mind it. I mean, again, you know what it is? I in my Letterboxd review, Josh, at Gopher Jason, I was like, this is the closest thing to a Norman Rockwell painting that we grew up with as kids, right? Like, this is so American and wholesome, but it's clever, it's smart. And we got to talk about the animation is just so much fun, that hand-drawn comic strip style 2D animation. It's very welcoming, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think especially at the time, as we noted earlier, where if you went to see an animated movie in a theater, almost always it was a Disney movie. So it was one very particular kind of animation that people were seeing. And so to go see this in a theater, I think would have been really refreshing for people. And even if it was similar to what they'd seen on TV, and so they kind of knew what to expect, it's very different. It doesn't look like, I mean, that's a good thing, is you could imagine some studio saying, oh, you're going to make a feature film, to Bill Melendez, make it look like a Disney movie because that's what people go see in theaters. And they didn't do that. And I really appreciate that. And yeah, I think the animation is great. And there's moments where it may also be a cost-cutting reason where suddenly kind of like the backgrounds fade away or whatever, but it adds to that trippy feel of it. Like, I think, and the tone too, with all the anxiety and the angst, it really fits with the way that this movie is animated. So I liked all that. And going back to what you said about Norman Rockwell, I agree that the Peanuts are very like Americana, but I think unlike Norman Rockwell, Charles Schulz is also very interested in interrogating that, right? Every one of these sequences, we get these characters kind of philosophically reflecting on what their very American pastimes, whether they're playing baseball or going to school and participating in a spelling bee or whatever. At one point when they're naming terrible things, one of the characters talks about like the freeway system, which I love that like this character is mentioning something that I feel like we don't hear about, at that time. Now we always reflect on, the people that were displaced by the building of the freeway system. And there it is in 1969 in this Peanuts movie.
There's that whole sequence where he's on the pitcher's mound at the beginning, which is a funny sequence anyway, because the pitcher's mound is covered with flowers, and the girls are like, "It's too cute. You can't get rid of the flowers." Which,
well, they also say that he's cute, which I think is,
right. So,
yeah.
And Linus agrees. So maybe there's a little something for you there, Josh. But then all the kids are out there and they're arguing over like the state of the world instead of like baseball. And it's like, we don't win a lot of games, but we sure do have interesting conversations, right?
Right.
So there's a little subversion there, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, I like it. I was surprised because in the latter, or maybe in the more famous one, certainly in the CGI one, right? You're used to get Charlie Brown just getting that little victory at the end there, right? So I really thought after he lost the spelling bee that like the kids would still be out there and, cheering him on. We still love you, Charlie Brown. And they would have been like, you're just happy to be back. Or they would have finally kicked the football, which was my own mistake. That would never happen.
That's never going to happen.
Charles Schulz even said in the last comic strip, he didn't let Charlie Brown kick the football. And like everyone thought he was finally going to let them. And then after he signed it, he's like, I should have let that kid kick the football. What a poor kid. So, yeah.
Nah, I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the ending briefly here, because I really like that the idea is that, right, he goes through all this and he loses the spelling bee and he just straight up fails, and all of the
hold on one second. He came in second in the national spelling bee. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it is. But the point is, he doesn't achieve what he's obsessed with achieving, right? He's fixated on the idea that he has to win the spelling bee in order for the kids to respect him. And he's right? They don't care that he got second place. Lucy is like, screw this guy. And all the other girls are like, forget him. And they come back, him and Linus and Snoopy. And there's the bit where they get off the bus and no one's there. And they're like, I guess they didn't know we were coming back today. And he's depressed. He's lying in bed all day. He doesn't go to school. And the little lesson at the end is Linus comes in, is trying to cheer him up. He does say that they won their first baseball game, but even in a way that's worse, right? Because Charlie Brown missed it. He didn't get to go to the baseball game that they finally won, right? Yeah. And the point that Linus makes is like, yeah, you lost. You didn't win the spelling bee. You didn't achieve this. And the world continues to exist. Life goes on. And I love that that's the lesson, that you can fail and feel horrible and realize that, in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't mean a whole lot and life continues. And I feel like that's a good lesson. And I like that was what it was. And it didn't try to sort of be falsely heartwarming there at the end.
Nothing matters. Very nihilistic.
I like it.
Yeah, I did like that ending, by the way. That was great.
All right.
So, we always talk about our research and, we go on Wikipedia, we go on other places. I go to IMDb and look up like the trivia. And I marked down this piece of trivia, which I thought very essential to the movie, Josh. The day after the spelling bee, Charlie Brown wakes up and puts on the same socks he wore the day before. This is bad hygiene practice and can increase the chances of developing plantar's warts on one's feet. 3 people thumbs up, 16 people thumbs down.
Yeah, that's a terrible fact.
Why would you put that on your? Why would you put that on an IMDb? Like, that's got nothing to do with the movie.
What are the standards for including that? That's ridiculous.
It should have been like this trivia brought to you by Dr. Schulz or
cartoon characters always wear the same clothes every day. That's like the concept of cartoon characters. But speaking of clothes, I did wonder, do you know, Jason, why do the kids wear those little white sailor hats on the bus all the time?
I don't know. That's a good question. So maybe.
I don't know either. But
maybe
it was
it's a holiday we don't. Maybe it was like, the Remembrance Day, D-Day, because they always have all these holiday things. So.
I don't know, but it was weird because it was like when Charlie Brown gets on the bus to go to the spelling bee with all the other kids who are part of the spelling bee, they're all wearing these hats, and I thought, maybe it's some sort of like thing for the event or whatever. But then later, when Linus and Snoopy decide that they have to go find Charlie Brown because he has Linus's blanket, and they take the bus, Linus wears one of the little hats, and then Snoopy puts his dog bowl on his head. Like, he's like, I better have a hat too. So I don't know. Is it a thing that you had to do to get on a bus? It's very strange to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer. So.
Yeah, it was just something that struck me as odd. And I don't know if it was just a weird little, because there are plenty of just weird little touches in here that are just idiosyncratic for the sake of it, or if it was a real thing that kids did or buses did. I don't know. But
that's okay, Josh. I think really we've now delved to the deepest realms of this film, and we should rate it out of 5.
Yeah, that's a good
which
one.
Just a fun fact, all the lines for the adults were written and recorded as dialogue, and then John Scooter, what's his last name, the composer there, one of the other composers there,
John Scott Trotter.
Yeah, John Scott Trotter. After they recorded it, John Scott Trotter would take a horn player in, and he would like get the cadence of the way it was delivered, and the horn player would play to the cadence of the lines, and that's how they got it. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, that's an impressive dedication to the realism of something like that.
Yeah. So out of 5, I give it 3.5.
I will also give it 3.5. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I wasn't sure because like I said, I had this sort of lukewarm impression, and I haven't watched any Peanuts things in quite a while, but I really thought it was fun.
Do you think, Josh, will you watch some of the other feature films from him?
I might. I don't know. I was hoping to watch some other stuff before this podcast, and I didn't get a chance to. But I would be open to that. I mean, it was a fun little movie, and the other ones are shorter. I think those other ones are generally not as well regarded, and as you said, they weren't as successful at the box office. But I bet they're fun to watch.
Maybe you and Lady Amazonian can watch it together.
Yeah, see if I can find a Dominatrix Peanuts fan. A very specific thing to look for.
Every time you hear a wah, 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 she whips you.
Okay. Dave, how would you rate this?
I'm going to go 2.5. Wah, 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 wah. So I'm going to raise it a little bit from Letterboxd.
He's changing his Letterboxd again. I caught you again, Dave.
No, this time I admitted it. I said
we convinced him to raise his rating, so that's good. We should be happy.
This was positive change here. Yeah.
On your Letterboxd, you talked about how much it depressed you.
Yeah, it did.
What was so depressing about it?
Well, I mean, I already talked about it. You guys kind of touched on it. It just didn't seem to bother you guys as much, but just how much everybody makes life shit for Charlie Brown.
I mean, that's life, man. I like that about it.
Yes, that is life. And as we joked in our responses on Letterboxd, like, a lot of the stuff that I love does get into those kinds of feelings. But I don't know. Here, I was just like, oh God, this poor kid. Like, he's a little kid. He's never going to get over this.
Dave was on his Letterboxd talking about how he didn't necessarily enjoy all the philosophical ruminations on the meaning of life. And I'm like, you're the biggest Charlie Kaufman fan I know. I don't understand what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me is what makes this so enjoyable. But that's okay. We'll come back in a moment and talk about the legacy of A Boy Named Charlie Brown. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1969, we're talking about our animation pick, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. And as we said, because this was such a big hit in theaters, it was followed up by 3 more theatrical feature films with the Peanuts characters through 1980. Jason, you mentioned Snoopy Come Home, Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown. and Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back. And you've seen those or some of those?
Yeah, I have, but it's been a while. I couldn't really tell you much about them. Not nearly as much as the TV ones. But I've watched them. I'd watch them again, and probably will watch them again. When I was watching this one for the podcast, Scarlett was like, "Why are you watching this with me?" And I'm like, "This is work, damn it." No, I didn't say that. She was busy doing homework, so I had to watch it. So
yeah, but that's nice that she wants to watch more Peanut stuff with you.
I think so, and I'm glad that it's the case. I mean, we want to, we want all types of animation in our lives, Josh.
Yes.
Here's the thing I want to bring up, though, Josh.
Yes, please.
Let's not forget the Peanuts adjacent, really skyrocketing pop cultural impact of the Charlie Brown sad Christmas song when George Michael doesn't get his lady in Arrested Development. That really brought it back to the pop cultural forefront when you're seeing George Michael walk with his head down and you hear doo, doo, doo.
Yeah, and doesn't he pass by like Snoopy's doghouse or something at one point?
I think they reference all of that, but that song I think really got back into the zeitgeist because of that. And now it's kind of fun, like when something goes wrong in your life, just to like put your head down and go, doo, 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 doo.
Yeah, I mean, all of that, the music and the characters. I mean, as we were saying, this is something that's been such an enduring pop culture presence. I mean, aside from the feature films, which, as we said, are sort of like not as constantly rewatched, there are more than 50 Peanuts TV specials really consistently being produced from 1965 to the present day. As I said, Apple at one point sort of purchased all of the past specials, and they've now been making their own specials. The most recent one came out just a few months ago, and there will, I'm sure, be more on the way. So Apple TV Plus, keeping those alive. They've also done a couple of different, I think, animated series with Snoopy and
Camp Snoopy or Snoopy in Space or whatever it is.
Right. And have you watched any of those?
I watched a little, but of all these specials I was looking through, I feel like I really want to watch It's Arbor Day, Charlie Brown.
They were really trying to stretch for the holidays there.
They were, they ran out of the big ones, and they're like, let's just go to Arbor Day, have the kids plant some trees or something like that. So.
Say Bastille Day, Charlie Brown, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a perfect sequel for Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown.
Right.
So.
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, I don't know how many of the later ones that I have seen. Like I said, that one about the kid with the cancer really just stuck with me. I don't know.
Yeah, you're easily bruisable, though.
I hope not. But I was curious to watch. There's one of the recent Apple TV specials was all about Marcy, and I feel like Marcy deserves her own special. So I was curious to check that out.
Well, yeah, when we talk about sexuality, right? Marcy and Peppermint Patty, that going to talk about a dom sub situation. I think the lesbian overtones there are heavy right there.
They are. So. And Marcy's not in this movie, even as a background character like Peppermint Patty is. So I would have been, I might watch that. That seemed like it was fun. And I always liked Marcy as a character.
Will you refer to me as Sir afterwards?
I will not. The comic strip, as we said, continued with Charles Schulz doing everything all the way basically until like 2 days before he died in 2000. And unlike so many other well-known comic strips, I assume the estate of Charles Schulz owns the rights to this, and they have not ever hired someone else to continue it. I mean, we make the new TV specials and the new movies, so it's not like the characters don't have new adventures or whatever without his involvement, but the comic strip itself continues only to exist in reprints if they run it in newspapers or online. And I think that's nice to keep something like that pure in a small way.
I was just so happy reading about, this Peanuts was $1 billion a year property. And like, I was really happy about that, because like, it doesn't feel like a cynical money grab. It feels like something that caught on for all the right reasons, and they curated it carefully enough to make it count. And I was really just thrilled about that. So
right. I mean, unlike something like Calvin and Hobbes, which is famous for Bill Watterson refusing to do any adaptations or any merchandising or anything like that, it doesn't have that level of purity, right? We have Snoopy advertising MetLife and, the Macy's parade balloons and tons of Peanuts merchandise. But at the same time, there is still a level of purity to it, I think, especially with the way that the comic strip ended.
Yeah, I was, you mentioned Watterson. Literally every big animator, every comic animator, a comic strip animator of since Peanuts came out holds this as the gold standard and an influence on, what they did, whether it's Garfield or The Simpsons or anything. Groening, Davis, they all love him. They all love Charles Schulz, and I do too, Josh.
And deservedly so, yeah. And so even after Schulz died, Bill Melendez continued to work on Peanut specials through 2006 before his death. So, he was another sort of consistent creative force for such a long time with these specials. And I think that's part of why they're also so beloved, is because they established this specific style with the animation based on Schulz's art and Melendez's direction and the Vince Guaraldi music. And you know what you're going to get from a Peanut special. And even when they create new ones, they really attempt to evoke that. I mean, that was one of the things I liked a lot about that 2015 movie, is that you go into this movie created by Blue Sky, the studio that made the Ice Age movies, and you think, oh, what are they going to do to these poor characters? But they really stick to that style, even if they do it via CGI, because there's such reverence for what Schulz has done.
Yeah, to me, what I liked best was that they weren't like, here's Charlie Brown, the coolest young rapper in town, right?
Yeah.
They really held honestly to the characters. And you would think like something like that's so sweet and, kind of maybe old fashioned wouldn't work, but it was a huge hit and it's a good movie.
It is a good movie. Absolutely. So as I was saying earlier, the one other thing that's distinctive is that they always get children to do the voices of these characters. So they're constantly replacing the actors. Peter Robbins, who played Charlie Brown here and had played him in all those early TV specials, so really established the sound of Charlie Brown's voice. This was his final appearance as Charlie Brown. And it's kind of sad to read about his later life. Yeah. He was a child actor, retired from acting in 1972 and worked in real estate, but he had a lot of mental health issues and was arrested and eventually died by suicide. So it's kind of a shame that, he wasn't able to enjoy the fame he got from being Charlie Brown.
It was sad reading about him. Reminded me of the William H. Macy character in Magnolia.
Yeah. So Pamelyn Ferdin, who plays Lucy, which was also her final appearance as that character, had a better later career, is still alive. She also retired from acting at a fairly young age and then became an animal rights activist. And seems to have, in later years kind of embraced the fan following for her work on the Peanuts movies. But, it's got to be tough, I think, as a child involved with something so popular to deal with that popularity.
Well, yeah, but like you said, she was in a ton of TV shows, a ton of movies. She played Fern Arable in Charlotte's Web, the voice of that. And the other voice actor I wanted to mention was Christopher DeFaria, who played Pigpen and often played Peppermint Patty. But he is the president of DreamWorks Animation Group for a long time, and he's a producer on such animated fare as Tom and Jerry and Coyote versus Acme, which we'll never see. Fuck you, David Zaslav.
Yeah, glad we got a fuck you, David Zaslav in here somehow. Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, Vince Guaraldi was kind of shackled by his association too, because he was this sort of mid-level jazz musician when they recruited him to start writing this music. And his music for the Peanuts specials was so iconic that basically nobody cared about anything else that he did. And he made a lot of money off of his Peanuts music and was able to tour, but it seemed like he wanted to break out from that and was unable to. And he died pretty young in 1976. So that's kind of a bummer.
He had finished playing a gig and then had a heart attack when he got off stage. He was only 47. So that was sad right there. You're saying, I agree with that. He did win a Grammy for a song called Cast Your Fate to the Wind. It was a radio hit as well, Josh. Best original jazz composition in 1963. Also, John Scott Trotter was the leader of the backing band for Bing Crosby, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, interesting who is associated with this. As I said, I was looking into Rod McEwen, who we didn't really mention much when we did the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie episode, but he was nominated for an Oscar for the song from that film. And there's a fascinating long article in Slate about Rod McKuen from a couple years ago. The idea that he was this massively famous, massively successful guy in the late 60s and early 70s as a singer-songwriter, but more as a poet. And he was this sort of like pop poet who sold 60 million copies of his books of poetry and 100 million records that were largely spoken word records. He is still the most popular poet in American publishing history, and nobody remembers
take that,
him
Walt
anymore.
Whitman.
Right? No, seriously. There was some statistic in there about Howl, the Allen Ginsberg poem, which is one of the most famous American poems of all time, right? Took 50 years to sell 1 million copies, right? And Rod McKuen would sell 1 million copies of a book in like a week or something.
Nice.
in the height of his popularity. And no one remembers him anymore, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting because Gene and A Boy Named Charlie Brown, both those songs are similar, Gene.
Yeah, and they're bad. And the tone of the article too is in a way like his poems were bad, but they were very popular because in a way because they were bad, right? They were simplistic and they sort of played on sentimentality, and that's what people were looking for. He's the Kenny G of poets or something like that. But
that Kenny G documentary was pretty good. I recommend it.
It was. And in a way, it's the same kind of thing, like understanding the popularity of something that we see as banal or whatever, that people who are snobs would look down on. But what is it that made this so popular? And it's an interesting article.
Yeah, you should put that up on the Facebook page. We should get a link to that. I have a question for you that, Josh, one of the facts I found, and I want you to tell me about it. The French language version replaces Rod McKuen's vocals with a French version sung by Serge Gainsbourg, Un Petit Garçon nommé Charlie Brown. I bet that would be awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, Serge Gainsbourg, definitely more talented than Rod McKuen.
A much sexier version of this song.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like this goes back to my imagination about the dynamic there between Charlie Brown and Lucy. There's some sort of little French dalliance that they got going on, maybe.
Josh, we also got to say 3 shows off Broadway, San Francisco, musicals that are performed to this day, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, the Peanuts characters are everywhere.
I do want to see, I was researching the specials. There's one, I think, from 1981 called The Big Stuffed Dog. And it's about Snoopy, but it's a plush toy of Snoopy as the main character. Huh. So that sounds like it could be fun. There's another documentary coming out next year along with the new movie as well.
Oh, and there just was a documentary on Apple TV not that long ago. So yeah, so much.
Plush toy, Josh.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Calvin and Hobbes thing, right? We got the plush toy Hobbes, and then Calvin thinking of him as coming to life. Is this implying that Snoopy is somehow imaginary in Charlie Brown's mind or something?
Oh, there you go. Looking too deep into it, because I don't think that could be possible because everyone else deals with Snoopy too.
Yeah, that I'm now curious about this special, just like you are. So that is A Boy Named Charlie Brown, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can wah at us online and on social media.
Yeah, wah is the perfect way to describe what people are writing on Twitter/X, where we are at Awesome Movie Pod. We're at Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. AwesomeMovieYear.com. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy on all those things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. Don't forget to check out Eat This Comedy. We are doing a lot more shows and take it on the road. So if you want us to come to you, let me know. And we could talk about Charlie Brown and Josh's proclivity for being dominated.
That sounds like a great time, really, for people to discuss those 2 specific topics with you.
That's all I do at the show.
Yeah. I'm at joshbellhateseverything.com, at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on X, Twitter, as well as on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think about the movies we cover on the show. You can check out our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at PiecingPod.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
It's my pick, right, Josh?
It sure is.
Well, this worked out perfectly, because if there is not a more opposite style film and filmmaker than Peanuts, then you'll have to tell me who it is, because we're going to Sam Peckinpah and we're going to the Wild Bunch. We're going to get violent, you motherfuckers.
All right. Tune in next time for the Wild Bunch. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
All right. Wait, hang on. I don't have my notes. That's probably a key element of this.
What an amateur he is, huh, Dave?
I know. Like, I knew there was something I needed to set up before this started. I did take the notes. I spelled all the words correctly with I before E.
Save it for the podcast, Josh.
Okay, sorry. Well, we're recording this.
Yeah.
Ah!
Yeah, we can leave those out.